Hmm? Ah!
Even though we are extraordinary black men, we're still treated as Negroes in this country. You know what I'm saying? We're still treated as secondhand citizens. So no matter how great we are, we still got to work harder than everybody else.
Podcast Junkies, episode 141. Let's try this again. Take two. For some reason, the first one didn't work out. I'm recording live from Yonkers, New York. I came here to, number one, visit my parents. It's my father's birthday this week, so it's been a year since I've been back on the East Coast. I'm really excited to be here. I'm recording this in one of the old bedrooms in my parents' house, so it's kind of surreal to be here recording a podcast episode. And the end of next week, I'm attending MapCon in Philadelphia, so please check that out. If you're going to be there, please let me know. I want to hang out with you. It's going to be a smaller conference, not as big as Podcast Movement, which I talked about last week, but definitely more intimate, and I'm really excited. Neil's going to be there. It's a whole bunch of cool people are going to be going. It's created and organized by Joe Pardo, and Jessica Kupferman, I believe, is going to be there as well. So I'm really excited. I love the smaller ones because the sense of community is really palpable. And speaking of community, I just debuted the Messengers documentary here in my parents' house. It was me, my mom, and my dad, and we watched it. It was so fascinating because I got to explain the concept of a podcast to my parents, and now they get it. And I tweeted about it, and I mentioned it in the Podfest group, which I'm a part of. And so it was really exciting. I got this warm feeling in my heart as I was watching again, because I've seen it before at Podfest and at Podcast Movement, just this feeling of this community, this family that we're building. And it's so exciting to feel like I'm part of that and that we're growing it, and the new people are coming in, and we're just as accommodating to the new people as to the people that have been doing it for 10 years. In case you missed last week's episode, speaking of community and superfans and passion, Kwesi Hankins, founder of the Podwabbit Network, is someone that I was connected with via, or thanks to, past fans and super supporters of the show, Chris Cerrone and Lacey Urcioli. They hold a meetup in Las Vegas, and Kwesi is part of that meetup, and he just fell in love with the show, and he quickly vaulted his way into the top of the superfan category. You know, people like Kwesi, people like Patrick, I'm just extremely passionate about them and the support and the love that they have for the show. And when you meet them, it's just inevitable that he was going to come on. And so I'm really happy that we had him on, and he talked at length about how he started, why he's podcasting, why a network, all the different variety of shows that he has on there, which is really fascinating. So this week we speak to Jay Connor. It's so interesting the way you meet people related to the podcast. I went to go speak at WeWork, and if you're not familiar with WeWork, it's a co-working space. There's one in Los Angeles. There's a couple in Los Angeles, and I went to speak at one of them, and it was a great conversation. I talked about how I started podcasting. They have a lunch session where they let you speak for about 45 minutes, and at the end of it, Jay came over, and he talked about how he had his own show, The Extraordinary Negroes, which is a fantastic name for a podcast. And we sort of hit it off, and we talked, we went downstairs, and we were just chatting it up for, probably about an hour afterwards. And I just realized, wow, this is the way, this is what happens in the podcasting community when you meet people who are like simpatico. And I just immediately knew. I mean, I literally had just met the guy like an hour or 2 hours ago, and I'm like, you're coming on the podcast. And it wasn't more than a week later where we did our session, and we just had a blast. We just picked up where we left off, and then we saw each other at Podcast Movement. And it's so funny how fast you can make connections when you can feel that people are genuine. So we covered so much. Like, we talked about this idea of binging on hip hop documentaries because we're both fans of hip hop. He talks about the event that led the way to his podcast blowing up. He talks about one of the things he's looking to do in the future with his podcast. We talk about where he grew up, culture shock. He was in the military, which is crazy. We go deep on some topics, that this idea of war being such a traumatic experience. We talk about something as diverse a topic as transphobia and how divisive it is. And then we talk about this responsibility that comes along with having a podcast. That and so much more was covered. And it's a really fascinating conversation that just weaves its way in and out in terms of emotional contact. content, and it is definitely getting the big stamp of explicit rating because there's conversations I tend to have where I'm just like, okay, we're just free flowing, top of the dome type stuff where like you speak your mind and I'll just let you talk like in the mode that you feel most comfortable, because I really want guests to really feel comfortable when they're on the show. So great conversation. I can't wait for you to hear it. Speaking of supporters of the show, Podbean, as always, dynamic, bang up job. I love partnering with them because I'm getting to know them and the community on a better level. When I was at Podcast Movement, I spoke to Shannon from Podbean. I spoke to Jennifer. I spoke to Vernon, my boy Vernon, who's been on the show as well. And we just hit it off. And what's funny is they have a podcast called Podcasting Smarter. And at the end of Podcast Movement, they recorded a special episode of that. So there's a bit of background noise in there, but it's fun to hear their enthusiasm for Podcast Movement. They talked a little bit about the dynamic ad insertion that I mentioned last week. So they provide more details about that in that episode of Podcasting Smarter. But they're just really high on the conferences and the value they got out of them and all the cool people that they met, the people that came up to their booth. So don't forget, please support them. Podbean.com/podcastjunkies to sign up. And as always, if you do sign up with the link, please let me know. I'd love to jump on the phone with you for about half an hour and just jam with you and feel and see what you're doing about your podcast and see how I can help. Don't forget, full show notes for this episode are available at podcastjunkies.com and /141. Can't forget that. And stay till the end of the episode. Super fans do that normally. Like literally, they get up in the morning, they brush their teeth, they like rinse their mouth with mouthwash. They have their breakfast, they go to work, they listen to their episodes, their favorite podcast episodes. Podcast Junkies is part of that list. And then they listen to the whole episode to the end, and they listen to what's called a retention hashtag. And that's the key, the super secret key, like in Indiana Jones, where he goes to the tunnel and the rocks are chasing him and there's that little bag of gold at the end. That's like what a retention hashtag is. So when you get it, you tweet about it. And I'm like, oh, I see. You got the gold. So you want to be the people that get the gold. You want to be the people that get the retention hashtag. And the way to do that is listen to the whole episode and then tweet about it. All the cool kids are doing it. Enough about that. Enjoy my amazing episode with Mr. Jay Connor. So Jay Connor, thank you for joining me on Podcast Junkies.
Thank you for having me, sir.
We've known each other all of about a week.
7 days. 7 days in. We go all the way back to like Tuesday.
It's so crazy. So for the listeners' benefit, I always like telling the backstory. I went to WeWork, which is a co-working space, which I think is all over the country. And Jay was hanging out in the lunch, Food for Thought, it's called. Promo I was given. I was talking about podcasting, and he came up to me after and got to chatting about all things podcasting. And I was like, this is a cool cat, so we're going to get him on the show, and we're going to see what happens.
Now we're BFF, so it's like it all came full circle, right?
Well, I think how's your bullshit meter? Like, can you tell? I mean, I'm pretty good nowadays as I get older. Like I can tell pretty quickly if I can vibe with someone and if they're cool people. And if I'm gonna have I feel like I'm gonna have like a friendship or just start a friendship with them.
Yeah. I think being in the entertainment industry, you have to have a bullshit meter. But at the same time, like the way that the entertainment industry works is that like sometimes you have to ignore it because you're trying to parlay a relationship into something more fruitful. And I mean, I think that works on both ends with a lot of people. So my bullshit meter definitely is intact, but sometimes I feel like, damn, I have to put up with this person because it'll help us both out in the end. But thankfully, I don't feel that way about you. You know what I'm saying? So
at least not yet. Not 7
I was about to say that can change on the 8th day. But so far we're rocking, man. So far we're rocking. We even supposed to hit up the concert last night. Yeah. That's some shit you don't do with people that set off your bullshit meter. So we're good. We're A1 so far.
Yeah, all my East Coast peeps are back in the East Coast, and I was like, that's one of those shows. So it's KRS-One and Slick Rick, The Ruler. Is the ruler in parentheses or is
The Ruler? No, I think it's all just like one name. You know what I mean?
But
like Busta Rhymes, like
yeah,
his last name or something like that. The Ruler, like maybe it's on his driver's license or something like that.
last name the ruler.
The Ruler.
No, props to them, man. I mean, he's like 52 and still holding it down. And I was like, damn, that's good, man. Well, what he was saying is like, it's interesting because he was saying, you know, hip hop and MCing, there shouldn't be an age limit on that because now it's like old school, new school, and like new cats are coming up and they're like, oh, like this is the new sound. He's like, I can still rap. Like he's like, I could still be doing this, you know, into like my 80s. He's like, we're like the Rembrandts. He was saying like the Rembrandts and the Picassos, and I was like, oh, that's true. You know, if you still got your voice, you can still rock it.
I agree to an extent, just because I mean I definitely think there shouldn't be an age cap on like hip hop, but at the same time, hip hop is inherently immature as far as like the subject matter. You know what I mean? Like the shit that they talk about, nobody wants to talk about being like 45 and like being in the club and like popping bottles and like what you were doing when you were 17. Like you look crazy. So I mean, if you can age gracefully and still like kind of like Common, you know what I mean? Like if you can age gracefully with your subject matter, that's cool. But like, you know, Jay-Z being lauded for suddenly making a mature album at 47 is fucking ridiculous. It's like I said on my podcast, like women don't get the luxury of maturing gracefully well into their 40s. Like that's something that men can do and women can't get away with. So yeah, I mean I think like a rapper like KRS-One, like he's just on some like MC. He doesn't really talk about shit. So it's not like the subject matter itself, he raps about rapping. So it's not like the subject matter itself is necessarily like immature, but I think generally speaking, we're in an age in which hip hop is really maturing for the first time because it's, you know, it's such a young genre. So I think it's interesting to kind of see like Jay-Z being the first relevant 40-plus-year-old rapper and kind of seeing what happens with that. But I'm with these old heads still, you know, getting money, but you know, they got to make relevant music to their age demographic. So
50 Cent releasing Go Shorty, it's your retirement party. We're gonna party like it's your retirement party.
Well, I mean, like 50's another guy. It's just like when you came out talking crazy and busting guns and bulletproof vests and shit, it was like, oh, that's cool. Like we look at you, we think that's cool, but it's like now you're like 40 plus and you're still on the same shit and you're making like TV shows and you're like a mogul and you're selling, and it's like we know this isn't who you are anymore. Why can't you just age with your music? You know what I'm saying? Like make more mature music. You can still like have that same personality, but it's like we know you're not shooting nobody. We know you're not about that life no more. Like it's a wrap. So
what's funny, for some reason I'm on a like hip hop documentary binge because I was watching Straight Outta Compton, and then I was watching the Hip Hop Evolution on Netflix, and then I got what's his name, Reggie Osei's Mogul podcast, which is amazing.
Shout out Combat Jack.
Yeah, Combat Jack, and it was just like crazy because they were all. Now I don't know where I heard it, but it was like the story about 50 Cent with the vitamin water was so crazy. He made like millions of dollars on that thing. Yeah,
it's crazy. Yeah, have you seen the the Stretch and Bobbito documentary?
No, not yet.
Oh my God, that's one of the best documentaries you will see in life. If you're looking for some East Coast hip hop shit as far as like a documentary goes, that's it right there. I went to the screening last year and it was just like Nori and Talib Kweli and all these other people showed up, and like, you know how like when they have the Q&A with the audience, like they bum rushed the microphone and we're fucking with them. It was dope shit. But yes.
Is it on Netflix?
I think so. Okay. I mean, I know it was on like, I know for a minute it was on like all these random things, but I think it's on Netflix now.
Yeah. Do you remember like when you got the podcasting bug?
Yeah, actually, I would say it was probably about like early last year, 2016. What had happened was I was just listening like everybody else is kind of as a fan, and in trying to, for those listening at home, I'm also a writer. And in trying to navigate through my writing career, I was thinking to myself, you know, I was just getting frustrated because there's gatekeepers in the entertainment industry, specifically being a writer. Like they feel like if you want to write for a TV show, you got to pay your dues. First, you got to be a PA, then you got to be a writer's assistant, then we might staff you. And I'm just like, yo, if I can write better than all y'all asses, like, why do I have to pay my dues? Like, it's just dumb. You know what I mean? Like, it just really doesn't make sense to me, and it never made sense to me. And I thought after being a writer's assistant no, I became a writer's assistant for this show once the podcast started. But yeah, after, trying to navigate through this space, I thought, like, what can I do for myself to kind of leapfrog everybody else? And I thought, if I created a podcast and it blew up, I will be able to have the opportunity to create the opportunities that I want for myself, because I'll become so popular. I'll become a name. People will want anything that I'm writing. So I thought, okay, that's the easiest way to just skip the line. And then, like, a little bit after I started it, one of the reasons why I hold Combat Jack in such reverence is because he's a direct influence on me starting my show.
Yeah.
The two biggest influences I had on my show were Combat Jack and Fan Bros, as far as like understanding like the format of creating a show. Because I always wanted to do something that kind of like simulated like a morning radio show, something with like segments, as opposed to just like, two people talking. So those are the two shows that really just resonated with me, and I was just big fans of them. And I kind of modeled my show after those, as far as just picking up on how to create segments and just kind of do it my way. So after I started the show, I actually started writing on a TV show, Strange Angel, which actually just got picked up over at CBS. So it'll be coming out next. It'll be coming out next year. And
so is that working in the writer's room?
Yeah, that was in the writer's room.
Is that your first writer's room?
That was my first writer's room.
Sweet.
And the thing that was crazy about it is that, like, the podcast immediately took off. Like, our first, you have so much stress in like creating it and all these things, and immediately blew up. Like, our first episode had like 6,000 listens.
Wow. And
I was like, holy shit. Like, I did, because I mean, you're always nervous when you first start something, because you're like, nobody's going to hear this. You know what I mean? But myself and my co-host Alex Hardy are lucky that we kind of had names within the writer's space before we started our show. We had connections. We knew people. So we had the luxury of bringing on our homeboys, Very Smart Brothers, Panama Jackson and Damon Young, for our first episode. So people were obviously interested in being like, oh shit, we want to hear what the four of them got to say when they get together. And just from there, just like, it just blew up. It just took off from there. But in starting the writer's room, then I had this dilemma of, okay, now that I'm committed to a show that's occupying 60 hours of my time, how do I balance this show? Because a podcast is a full-time job.
Yeah.
So how do I balance this show with running a podcast? And like, during the show, I was getting out of there at 6, getting home and leaving Culver City, fighting through that traffic. I would literally walk in the door and we'd start recording. And then sometimes there'd be nights where I was like sneaking editing, like, that night, or even like in the writer's room, you know what I mean? Like editing episodes whenever I had like a second, like during lunch or something like that. You know what I mean? Just threw the headphones on, and while everybody was eating, I was just trying to put it out. So yeah, I just really committed myself to it. I told myself I will go balls out for a year, see where it goes. And in the first year, we got invited out to South by Southwest, which is crazy. We got a shout out in New York, in the New York Times. We got a shout out with Bitch Media, wrote about us being one of the best, feminist approved podcasts, which is really cool.
That's cool.
And just, other places are reaching out, and, Alex and I have done some other events, and we had our we hosted a watch party in DC, and that had like 200 people show up for that. We had the luxury of being a part of a podcast meetup in New York, and like a bunch of people showed up for that. So I mean, it's just like crazy to see how far we've come in a year. So
for the benefit of the listener, the show is called The Extraordinary Negroes. Who came up with the name?
I did, actually. One of the things that I wanted to do in creating the show is the market is so saturated. So I said 2 things that I'm gonna need to stand out is 3. 1, I'm gonna need to have a dope ass name that's immediately gonna get people's attention. 2, I'm gonna need to have some dope ass cover art that's gonna get people's attention. And 3, I'm gonna have to have a great show that backs up the other 2. Because it's like, okay, if I like the name and I like the cover art, the show better be good. And thankfully, people feel that it is. So the meaning behind the name, I was kind of bouncing around some ideas for a minute. And the meaning behind the name is that, like, even though, people see the name and they automatically think there's some kind of certain connotation, and there is, but even though we are extraordinary black men, we're still treated as Negroes in this country. You know what I'm saying? We're still treated as secondhand citizens. So no matter how great we are, we still got to work harder than everybody else. You know what I'm saying? We still got to bust our ass to be treated as equals. And it's kind of like, a double meaning behind that. And it's definitely something that, we both identify with and resonates with our audience. And I mean, we just try to use our platform to shed light to issues within our community, to give other people voices that don't have voices, as far as other rioters, as far as other, people that are doing dope shit in their community. And we really just try to be a beacon of light, just because we're fortunate enough in that we have a platform that people pay attention to. I just had this conversation this weekend with our editor-in-chief of our website. And I was like, it's crazy because we're entering this space where we're becoming tastemakers, as far as like people like emailing us and inboxing us and saying, hey, this is something that is going on. I would love if you guys could, draw attention to this, or what do you guys think about this? Or like, people are actively looking for our cosign. And it's interesting to kind of segue from being a fucking nobody and being ignored all my damn life to people suddenly giving a shit about my opinion. So it's pretty cool. It's an interesting transition, and we're just continuing to grow and evolve. And I'm looking to expand upon the team and just make some more magic. And
I got the sense from the title that it was you, that the title was reflective of the guests you were highlighting more so than it was about the hosts.
I think it's kind of all encompassing. I mean, I think that obviously we are the Extraordinary Negroes, because that's just like our name. But I mean, I think it's kind of all encompassing. One of the things that I'm definitely looking to do in the future is, as much as we love to advertise ourselves as being, or promote ourselves as being, unapologetically black, I think that in doing that, we've actually kind of deterred people from other ethnicities from participating on the show, not listening, but as far as participating and coming on as guests, because they feel like, oh, you have to be black. And it's like, well, no, you don't. We're the Extraordinary Negroes. You know what I'm saying? We just want to talk about things from our perspective. Yeah. So I think one of the things that I definitely want to, we're on a little bit of a break right now. Finally, after a year, I'm taking a breather. One of the things that I'm looking to do in the future is kind of make it a little bit more inclusive as far as our guests go.
So do you think that, I mean, a lot of people have this argument all the time, like, the fact that you're creating this environment as a safe space, right? Safe space for your community to talk just openly about shit that is really bothering you. And some of it may be hot button topics, but it's just like when you're in that space and you're all talking about the same topic, then you feel like, okay, our guard is down. We don't have to worry about being politically correct. And we can just say like what is really bothering us, or what's getting under our skin. And I think a lot of people get freaked out because they're just like, well, why aren't you making it more inclusive? And I'm like, well, there's plenty of places for like other people to go and like Caucasians or whatever you want to call them, or Spanish people, like they have their channels. And so the fact that you have a channel that's specifically just for your tribe, I think there's really nothing wrong with that, because I think that's the only place where you can have that environment where you feel safe in terms of, and the people that you bring in, right? Your guests come in and they're like, and they know that, they're going to be treated well by you guys.
Yeah. I mean, I think that one of the things that people love to do is they like to play well, if we had, and it's like, well, you do have, you know what I'm saying? Like podcasts such as mine were created out of necessity. That's literally the only reason things like these were built and created, because we felt like our stories, our voices, our experiences weren't being represented. So, I mean, for people to come in and be a guest, that's fine. But at the same time, it's like when people play well, if we had card, it's just fucking stupid. Because I mean, look at the television. You know what I mean? How many shows are just pure white people? I mean, Game of Thrones is one of the most popular shows out there. Good luck finding a black person on that shit.
I was thinking about that the other day. I was like, well, there no, like, what? Why couldn't? Yeah, I don't know.
So, I mean, it's just like, a lot of these spaces for people of color, regardless of their ethnicity, have been created out of necessity. And if people would understand that, they would be more receptive. And if anything, they can use these as opportunities to learn. You know what I'm saying? That's why I invite people of other ethnicities to partake and enjoy our show and participate in our social media. Because, I mean, we get a lot of traffic on our social media pages with people, having conversations based upon the content that we disseminate. And sometimes, white people feel like, I don't know if I'm welcome here. And it's like, it's not a matter of you being welcome. It's a matter of, this is our home. This is our space. And if you want to participate, just remember you're a tourist. You know what I'm saying? Use this as an opportunity to learn. And if you don't want to use this as an opportunity to learn, well, then you have no place here. Otherwise, you know what I'm saying, you're more than welcome to be here. And we definitely make it a point to talk about issues that would be quote unquote controversial, because as a black man in America, I don't have the opportunity of averting controversial issues. You know what I'm saying? Like every time I wake up and turn on the TV and look at, you know, how I'm being presented or the things that people of color experience, it's a bunch of BS. So we talk about it in order to process what's going on, and this is how we heal. So I just like to use my show as kind of like a salve, you know what I'm saying? Like a healing balm for my community.
When do you remember when you started taking an interest in writing? Because you definitely, you know, you have a way with words, and I love your Twitter handle, Death to Adverbs.
Yes. Yeah, my Twitter handle and my email. Yeah, definitely writing related. As far as I can remember, I've always been kind of passionate about writing. I mean, I remember even being in like high school and writing, like, I want to say novels, but they definitely weren't novels, but, you know, writing long fictitious tales in my notebooks. You know, I'm just straight, just freehand, or excuse me, as word processors came into play, you know, just hacking away on on my mom's typewriter whenever she was asleep, or, you know, going to staying after school to write on the computer. So, I mean, I think writing is and storytelling is always something that I've always been passionate about. I've always been one of the artsy fartsy kids. I've always had like this weird dichotomy of being the kid that was like too cool for the nerds and too nerdy for the cool people.
Yeah.
Because I've always been like into like drawing. I used to draw all the time. I've always been into music. I make music. I've always been into writing. So I've always been drawn to the arts as long as I can remember. So it's just kind of who I am.
Where'd you grow up?
Well, I was born originally in New York, in the Bronx.
Okay.
And we left there, I think I was about like 8, 9 whenever we bounced from there. And then we relocated to Tulsa, Oklahoma. A little bit of a culture shock.
A little bit.
To make sure that, you know, my parents' heathen child, me, wasn't, you know, getting in any shit. And I consider Tulsa home, because that's where I grew up. You know what I mean? As far as being in the middle of nowhere and being in, you know, the country and growing up in, you know, that rural environment. Yeah, Tulsa was definitely home. And then whenever I was 19, I left for the Air Force and moved to Arizona in Tucson. And then after I got out the Air Force, I moved to Phoenix in 2003. And then I stayed in Phoenix until 2014 when I moved out here. So I've been kind of all over the map. Started on the East Coast, worked my way to the West Coast.
That's crazy. I mean, the differences in culture in and of itself must have been a bit of a shock. And I'm wondering, do you remember like the first moment that you can like think of where you realized like there is a difference in cultures, and it might have been the minute you moved, but I'm wondering if you can think of a memory like that.
Honestly, I think the biggest culture shock I experienced was when I joined the military, in part because that was the first time like I had to function as an adult.
Mm-hmm.
As a child, obviously, you know, moving from the concrete jungle to like Klan country was a little bit jarring, but it was definitely whenever I became an adult and I left from Tulsa to Phoenix, because Phoenix was like the first time I really felt like I lived in a major city.
Mm-hmm.
I was so young in New York, it was just kind of, it was what it was. Yeah. But like being like an adult and living in Phoenix and like dealing with like 5-lane highways and, you know, having to find apartments and traffic and like bills and shit. Like it was like the first time I really felt like an adult. And I think that was like the biggest culture shock I ever experienced. The transition to LA was pretty smooth, in part because I wanted to get the hell out of Phoenix. But yeah, I would definitely say my transition from Tulsa to Phoenix was the biggest one.
What was the Air Force like?
The Air Force, man.
And why that branch over all the others?
Primarily because I didn't want to get shot. I mean, the biggest thing with the Air Force is what happened is I was a shitty student in school, and not because I wasn't smart. If anything, I was too smart, and my teachers were telling my parents like, "Yo, put him in like advanced classes because he's not doing shit." And for whatever reason, my parents were terrible and they didn't. So I just fucked off high school entirely. And senior year, I'm all looking at my friends and I'm like, yo, we're not going to go to, you know, screw college. We're not doing that. You know what I'm saying? Like, yo, we're rebels. We're going to make it work. We're going to just have high school diplomas. And all my friends are like, hell yeah, dude. And then they graduated and they all dipped for college. I was like, oh man, y'all are foul as hell.
What happened to the master plan there?
Right. So they left me behind and I got a job at Walgreens in the photo lab. And I thought I was the man until I realized I didn't have a car. I'm still living with my parents. I'm getting no women, and I'm working like 40, a full-time job, and I ain't got no money. And I'm like, yo, I'm gonna end up being that lame dude that's like 50 and working at McDonald's. And I was like, I got to do something. And I think that's kind of been like my unofficial mantra in life is like, how do I leapfrog everybody else? So then I thought, okay, if everybody else is going to school, what can I do so that 4 years from now, instead of going to school, I can be way farther ahead of everybody else? And my mom kind of pitched like going into the military. And I was like, the fuck? I was like, hell no, I get shot? Nah, player. No. She's like, well, no, it depends on the branch and all this other stuff. And so they talked, they pulled me in. I went to the recruiter's office, chopped it up with them. I like what the Air Force was talking about. And they were like, based upon your score, you can get whatever job you want. And I'm like, okay, cool. Cause I'm not about to be out there like shooting people. Cause that's just not my thing. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And if you score low enough, your ass gonna be out there shooting people. But
stay in school, kids.
Seriously, stay your ass in school. Get you a good job. And so I killed it on the test. I scored like crazy high, and I scored so high they thought I cheated. So apparently black smarts don't matter. So they were like, yo, you got to take this thing again because you cheated. And I'm like, what the fuck? So yeah, it was the ASVAB. So I took it again. And then the second time I scored even higher.
Oh shit. That's awesome.
So I was like, what's up? They're like, you can basically have any job you want. Like you're a rock star. So I decided I want to be a computer network administrator. I want to get straight to the money. So I did that while I was in, and unfortunately, they made my ass go to war after 9/11 popped off. So I was doing so good, dodging, having to do the whole craziness out there. But unfortunately, I experienced war. Not fun at all. But yeah, I did. I was a computer guy in the military, and I decided when it was time to get out, I had like Pentagon and General Dynamics and Raytheon and all these companies throwing me like these crazy ass jobs that started like with 6-figure jobs, like high 6-figure jobs. So they were like, you can do this on the outside and get paid. But after going to war and dealing with all that stress, and because I had like a TSSCI security clearance, which is like stupid high.
Yeah.
And what they do is it's cheaper for them, even if you don't know how to use a computer, it's cheaper for them to hire somebody that has that clearance, because that clearance is like $80,000 to $100,000. It's cheaper for them to hire somebody that has that clearance than it is for them to hire you and teach you how to do the job and pay for that clearance. You know what I'm saying? So so the fact that I had that clearance and I actually knew how to do the job, they were like, oh, they were like, yo, take our money. And I was just like, no, I'm not doing this.
So let me jump in there for a second, because most people would probably take the job.
It was some good ass money.
Yeah, I'm sure. Shit. Especially after the Walgreens photo experience.
Yes. And the pennies I was probably making even less in the military than I was at Walgreens. So yeah, it was definitely
So what is it about you or the way you were raised that made you think twice when it came time to make that decision?
Honestly, war is just such a traumatic experience. That's not something that like human beings are created to experience. Like something like that it's kind of like why a lot of times I get irritated when people ask when people ask me or people ask other veterans like, yo, what was war like? And it's like, war is a traumatic, like seeing people die, having to fight for your life. I mean, like I have like a big ass scar on my neck right now from my whole experience. That's like 6 inches. And it's just like, these are not things that people want to like talk about. You wouldn't walk up to a rape victim and say, hey, tell me about your rape. So I don't really understand why people feel comfortable. And I get that there's like a curiosity people have about war because it's something they haven't experienced. But I mean, people need to be more considerate when having these conversations, because it's traumatic. Nobody wants to talk about a traumatic experience. if we forfeit that information, that's one thing, but
yeah, PTSD is real, right?
no joke. But yeah, what made me decide to pass was that I was just not feeling the whole military thing, and I was just like, I'm not doing this. I'm not doing another. I've already did 4 years of this shit. I'm not doing any more of this. So my dumb ass, I was like, I'd much rather do something more impactful in my immediate community than the world. And I decided to be a social worker. And instead of making, $250,000 a year, I was making $25,000 a year.
Lopped off a zero there.
Yeah, and it's just like people, and it was very hard to get into because they didn't believe that I wanted to do it. They looked at my resume and they were like, clearly you're having a rough job. You're having a rough time just trying to find a job.
Yeah.
There's no way we're going to hire you because you're not going to stay here. Once you get what you want, you're out. You know what I mean? And I was like, no, this is what I genuinely want to do. And they're just like, yeah, right. Why would you, like you said, chop off a zero in your income when you could be making like bank? Yeah. And meanwhile, I'm having like, and what made it extra stressful is like this whole time I'm having like recruiters from, like I said, like Raytheon, General Dynamics, like blowing up my phone, sending me emails. I mean, to this day, I've been in the military in 14 years. And to this day, I have people emailing me, offering me jobs, calling me up all the time, trying to get me to do that computer stuff because they know that once you have that clearance, you're in. It's kind of like an alumni. You know what I'm saying?
Does that never goes away?
No, it expires, but I think it's just cheaper to renew it.
Wow.
Than it is to just get a whole new one or whatever. I don't know. I don't care. I'm never going to get it renewed. But yeah, to this day, they still blow me up, which is insane. So
yeah, you have an opinion on Snowden?
He might be a necessary evil, man.
Yeah.
He might be a necessary evil. I mean, I didn't pay too much attention to all the particulars of it just because I'm such an information sponge. I'm constantly paying attention to everything. And I don't always get to pay attention to the fine details of certain things. But from what I remember or what I, recall, that whole NSA thing, man.
Enemy of the State, man. That movie.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy. But I mean, military in general, if I could do it again, I wouldn't have gone in the military, especially being a black man and to fight for your country. And I came home and people were spitting on me and like treating me like I wasn't shit. And I'm like, I just spent 9 months in the damn desert and I come back and y'all are spitting on me. I'm like, yo, y'all are bugging. So I mean, between that and just understanding as an adult or as a more mature adult that like the military is an extension of colonialism, it's just like not something that I would feel comfortable doing if I could do it again. I'm grateful for the benefits I earned, but I wouldn't do it again.
Well, I mean, I just have to feel like that whole arc that you just painted really colors like what you bring to the show, on a regular basis. I mean, this like, how can it not, right? Like, and you just have these perspectives, and it's like this voice that needs to get out, and there's I don't know how many people have that. The collection of experiences that you have, to bring these different perspectives, and now that you have a platform, it's like, okay, like everything, like if you feel like destiny or something like that, like everything, all moments were leading to this, right?
Yeah. And it's kind of interesting too, because it's like in having a podcast, which you have one, it's like you have all these experiences and part of you feels like, these are stories I want to tell, but the way my show is crafted, much like yours, it's not about me. It's about other people's stories. Mm-hmm. So I get to use the experiences that I've accrued and the perspective that I've kind of forged to kind of inform people on, different cultures and different events and things that are going on in our world, and using our guests as kind of like a conduit to speak about certain things. Like on our most recent episode, we spoke with a gentleman by the name of Marlon Peterson, who, has been in Essence and Cassius Life and did a TED Talk and all these things. And his mission is centered around criminal justice and mass incarceration and, 13th Amendment and all these things that, disproportionate jail sentences and things like that. And these are things that obviously concern me, but I would be lying if I said I was informed on these things. You know what I mean? And that's part of the beauty of the show is that like I can have informed decisions with people that are experts in these fields, but at the same time have a conversation where I can learn and then they can serve as a conduit to not only educate me, but educate other people. So it's pretty dope.
Yeah. I mean, I think we underestimate the power of it. And I think in the beginning we think like I don't know a lot about that topic, but to your point, if you bring in the experts and you come in with the natural curiosity and be like, I just want to learn more, and I'm gonna put myself in the listener's shoes and ask the sort of questions that I think if they were here they'd be asking, then I think that's when you're providing a service
exactly
to your audience.
And one of the things that I also make a point of doing is trying to incorporate as many Black women as possible, just because we're at a stage where a lot of Black women feel like they're not being heard and they're not being respected and they're not being appreciated within my community. So I always make it a point to try to get as many Black women guests on there as possible, to speak to as many Black women issues as possible, because with us being two male hosts, it's important that women feel like men are actually paying attention to your issues. You know what I'm saying? Because there's a million fucking shows out there with men hosts, and then they just want to have their homeboys on and have like and that's cool if that's what you want to do, that's fine. But we need to have more dialogues in which we're talking about toxic masculinity, in which we're talking about patriarchy and dismantling it, in which we're, being giving women a platform to speak. And one of the episodes that I've been brainstorming on for about like 5-6 months now is doing an episode on like realistically what would it look like to dismantle patriarchy? Like what can we do as men to do this? And initially I wanted to invite like 2 women on to have it, but I was like, that's not their job. It's not a women's job to dismantle something that they didn't build, nor are they active proponents of or supporters of. You know what I'm saying? If men are benefiting and have created and forged patriarchy, it's our job to dismantle it. So instead of having women on, I might have one that's just kind of like, to get that female opinion. But primarily, I want to talk to other men. Like, men, what do we need to do to address these things? What do we need to do to resolve these? What do we need to do to rectify and heal our communities in regards to the male-women dynamic?
Yeah, but you got to have some progressive brothers on there who are open to talk about these topics and not afraid of like wearing their heart on their sleeve. And I know there's a kind of renaissance of that kind of man happening now. And just, I call it like heart-centered and just speaking, your truth in terms of what you feel without feeling like you're going to be embarrassed or your boys are going to call you out or some shit like that, and to have people like who are willing to do that. And I imagine there's more and more, you're finding more and more people like that, but I'm wondering if in the beginning you felt like it was harder to get people like that.
I don't think it's ever been hard to find people like that, but I think if anything, though, I definitely noticed that people feel kind of empowered and grateful for the platform that we've created, and that other people feel like they've been empowered to speak because we said something. You know what I mean? Like there's always got to be somebody to kind of kick the door open. Yeah. And I'm not the first person, excuse me, but for the people behind me, I'm the first person for them. You know what I'm saying? And, we definitely see it in other shows. We definitely hear it from our fans and our social media. Like I said, we got like 43,000 followers. So it's crazy to kind of hear them be like, oh man, we appreciate it. These are conversations we need to be having. So it's dope to just, prioritize things of this manner. Let's have the uncomfortable conversations. Let's move past our discomfort, because we can't sit there and direct all this energy towards, we can't create these expectations when it comes to challenging and combating racism. And white people need to move past white fragility and their discomfort in order to address these things, when we're not willing to do the same thing in regards to other issues. You know what I'm saying? Whether it's cultural appropriation, whether it's, patriarchy and things of that nature. You know what I'm saying? Like, I have to, as a man, I have to move past my discomfort and address these things. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? It's not always, the burden and the onus doesn't always fall on a woman to rectify these mistakes. It's not fair. You know what I'm saying? If I punch you in the face, it's not your job to fix and find out why I punched you in the face. You know what I'm saying? It's my job to be like, whoa, that was fucked up. Why did I do that? You know what I'm saying? Yeah. And that's what it is. So, if we're going to, and that goes for, the LGBTQ community as well. You know what I mean? Like, we have a lot of divisiveness, especially right now with, the transphobia thing being a major issue right now within the Black community. And it's just like, if we're not willing to, you can't be pro-Black or you can't be pro anything if it's exclusive to anything within that arena. You know what I'm saying? Like, I can't say like, I'm for unity and all this other thing, but I don't fuck with gay people. Like, that makes no sense. Or Black women stay in their place, or the fuck is wrong with y'all? Like that makes no sense whatsoever. So it's like, if we're gonna ride, and we need to work through these issues together and do whatever we need to do to move past our discomfort and heal as a community.
Well, I mean, if any community can relate to this idea of being like pushed to the side and not treated with the respect like it's the Black community, obviously with all this, the history of what's going on in this country. So, the fact that there's people that can't see that what has been done to them is exactly what you're doing to this other, subgenre of a community. It does boggle my mind, because they seem to be able to compartmentalize, like, oh, I can, support the Black community, but yeah, gays, like they make me uncomfortable or something like that. Man, it's crazy.
Well, it's kind of like a crab in a barrel mentality, in that it's like, I'm fucked up, but at least I'm not you. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, I can feel better knowing that my shit might be like, I might be in a bad way, but at least it's not as bad as yours is. You know what I mean? So, and people got to move past that, because it's like, yo, we gotta all ride together.
Yeah, I think what's happening now, it's very interesting, because like millennials and stuff, like they're growing up in a world where like gay parents are normal, and just like, and so when people are against that, they look strange. Like, wow, you really think that? Like, you think like it's weird to be gay or transgender, and all these TV shows are just putting it into the front, and they're making a lot of people squirm, because they're not having anywhere to hide, and the latest presidency is bringing out the craziest batshit people in the world, because you're just like, oh, those people are still in this country, and like I think we forgot for a second that they were still there, and I think we needed one more round of like a crazy president to kind of like just like
upheaval.
Just get these people out and exposed, because there's some just scary shit, like in terms of what people think that's still out there.
Yeah. I mean, we got a president that just said, like, transgender people should not be in the military.
Yeah.
Listen, as somebody who's been to war, I don't give a fuck. As long as you know how to bust a gun and keep my ass alive, I don't give a shit. But at the same time, though, it's foul and discriminatory to sit there and say who can and can't defend our basic human rights. You know what I'm saying? Because I mean, that's one of the things that really bugged me about being in the military, was that when they had the gay ban, it was like, me and you go to war, but when I come home, my wife is good as far as health benefits, but your husband isn't. That makes no fucking sense. We just literally fought the same war, but you don't get benefits, but I do. That makes absolute no sense. And then, years ago, my ass wouldn't even get anything. So it's just like, it's just bananas. But I mean, kind of to your point, people talk about like the gay agenda and all this other stuff, and it's just like, there is no gay agenda. It's just a matter of people are allowed to be themselves. Finally, people been gay since the beginning of time. Totally. You know what I'm saying? People been transgender since the beginning of time. They just didn't always have the access to the resources to be able to feel like they could be themselves. And it's just a matter of people are just more and more. Society is being more and more receptive to people expressing their differences.
What do you think about this responsibility that now seems to come with this platform and this? The people listening to you on a regular basis now. Do you think about that? And does it color like anything that you do on the show?
Oh yeah, we absolutely feel like we have a responsibility. I just had a conversation about this with my homeboy Panama Jackson of Very Smart Brothers, who has a massive platform of his own, and we were talking about how, like, or specifically, I was talking about how, if I'm gonna keep it 100, after Lil Duval went on the Breakfast Club and made some, transphobic comments, I was talking about how, like, I have a fear of fucking up, making a joke because me and Alex, we love to talk about serious stuff, but at the same time, we like to mix up the being informative with being entertaining. So sometimes we might make some jokes that are just crass and just like left of center. But like I was telling him, I was like, I always have a mortal fear of saying, because we live in a day and age of the canceled culture. It's like you fuck up and they immediately say, yo, you're canceled. We're not fucking with you no more. Have a nice life. And it can just completely just derail your career. And it's like, I was telling, Panama, I was just like, yo, there's times when like I'm legit like paranoid. I'm going to say something. And thankfully, this medium isn't live. I can always go back in and edit it. But I mean, there's been plenty of times when like, well, I shouldn't say plenty of times, but there's been a few times where me and Alex will like say something on the show and I'll be like, yo, you are wilding for saying that. I'm absolutely taking that out. We'll get killed. You know what I mean? We definitely feel like we have a responsibility just because we feel like we're so respected, especially when it comes to women. I feel like we can be a little bit more lenient when it comes to men. But I mean, I think that women really feel like, okay, these are two guys that get it. So don't fuck it up because, you know, you have a responsibility to speak to other men about curtailing behavior and, you know, addressing certain situations that are, you know, decimating our community. So, yeah, we definitely feel like we have a responsibility because I mean, you know, we write an article, it goes viral. We, you know, say something on the show, we have, you know, thousands of people that hear it. You know what I mean? So I wouldn't probably feel like I had that responsibility if like nobody was listening to our show. But I mean, to know that every week thousands of people tune into what it is that we have to say, it's like, okay, like I have to make sure that I stay on point.
How much of that do you credit to your upbringing?
That's a good ass question. I guess it is kind of a byproduct of my experiences, whether it's, you know, the discipline that I accrued and learned to implement being in the military, whether it's the career that I had as a social worker, as far as gaining a better understanding of and seeing certain elements of society that most people aren't exposed to, whether it's being a writer and, you know, kind of spending a lot of time in my imagination and kind of looking at the world differently. I mean, I definitely think that between the three of those things and between moving coast to coast, I definitely think all of those have kind of influenced my perspective on the show.
Who in your family is the most surprised at where you've ended up?
I don't think any of them are. I mean, I've always been, you know how, well, no, I don't, that sounds like bragging, but some people are just like, no, but I mean, it's just like some people, I'm sure there's people you've encountered in your life where you just look at him and you just be like, that guy's got something. You know what I mean? Yeah. I don't know what he's going to do with it, but he has something. And people have always looked at me like, okay, Jay is going to be the one that's going to figure something out and he's going to go somewhere in his life. So I don't think they're surprised at all in what I've set out to do because I go balls out. I'm extremely ambitious. I mean, even now in laying the groundwork for starting my own, you know, the multimedia company and some other things that I have in the pipeline that I almost revealed, but I can't yet. But nah, it's just like I've always kind of worked harder than everybody else. I've never been the person that works smarter, and I'm trying to work at working smarter. But I've always been the person that just outworked everybody and was just looked at life differently and just kind of had a different perspective. So I don't think my family is surprised at all at where I've been or where I am now.
Yeah, it seems like the people that are closest to you always are rooting for you, and they know that you're going to have to work out your life through the Walgreens jobs and through the low paying jobs. And I think but the important thing is that they believe in you all the way through.
Word. And I think with me, I've always been somebody who was never risk averse. Whether it was, okay, I'm in the military and I could just be safe and just have like these $100,000 jobs and just be set for the rest of my life. Or I can just say, fuck that, throw caution to the wind and go be a social worker and make $25,000. Or the fact that I was like, okay, well, social work is getting kind of burned out. Let me go move to LA and be a writer, even though I don't know anybody within that space and making it happen. So, I mean, I've always had an irrational fear in myself, and thankfully it's worked out for me so far. Hopefully I don't run out of luck anytime soon, but yeah, I just think that, you know, if you're passionate about things and if you're passionate and and have a curiosity, I think they can prove fruitful if you're willing to put the work in. And for me, I've been very fortunate in that regard, in that not only did I have an irrational confidence in myself, people had an irrational belief in me.
That's just important.
Yeah.
What was it for listeners who aren't familiar with the Combat Jack show? What was it about that format that when you heard it, it was something that you were drawn to?
For me, it was because I mean the format is pretty straightforward. He bullshits for about 5 minutes and then he jumps into an interview. But for me, what stood out about the show was the level of research and detail that he goes into in his interviews. Because I mean, most interviews, people just like ask like superficial questions or like, oh, you're a rapper? Well, what do you think about your most recent? Like, just lazy shit. You know what I'm saying? But like, yeah. I would listen to him and I'd be like, this guy really does his homework. And it's not just a matter of that. It's a matter of like, even outside of the questions he's asking, whenever he's bantering with his interviewee, like he's throwing little things in there that like that he did you know what I mean? Like if he's interviewing you, he'd be like, yeah, do you fuck with KRS and Slick Rick, and you'd be like, the hell? Like, how did you know that? You know what I mean? Even outside of the question.
Yeah.
So I was just always fascinated by the level of depth that he goes into for his interviews. So I mean, he's still supposed to be coming on our show, and I did a ridiculous amount of research on him because my thing was that like I can't have him come on and then I give him a shitty interview. You know what I'm saying? So I was like, you got to do your homework. And when we touched base, when he was out here, he was like, yo, let's do it. You know, tomorrow I'm out here for a few days. And I'm like, fuck that. I need to do some research. So I did my research and I'm ready to roll. So hopefully we can make the schedules coordinate soon.
Yeah. He mentioned that on Mogul. No, he was on The Turnaround. That's Jesse Thorne's podcast where he interviews other interviewers. He's interviewed Larry King.
Yeah,
Jerry Springer. He had Katie Couric, and he interviewed Combat Check. Reggie on there, and he was talking about like, yeah, when I'm researching for a guest, he's like don't come near me. Like I'm just like I need to get in the zone, and I got like work to do, so don't bother me. And
yeah, that's real.
Serious, man. It's like I gotta know what I'm going into, and he was just all about being prepared, which is awesome.
Yeah, definitely.
So, changing gears a little bit for a second, what do you think is the most misunderstood thing about you?
I think people think that I'm way more social than I am. I think people look at me and they think that I'm like this cool guy that hangs out all the time when literally I don't do shit but work. Like people think that I'm always out, that I'm hanging out, that I'm in the streets, that I have like all these friends and all these women and all these, like, I don't know where the hell they get this from, or, you know, I'm always Mr. Party. And I'm like, literally, I sleep in my apartment, but I'm almost always in my WeWork office. Like I work like a maniac. I would say like 60, 70, maybe even 80 hours a week. I mean, even outside of like in my writing gigs, I devote anywhere from 4 to 5 hours a day, bare minimum, into the podcast. So, all I do is work. And I think that that's definitely something that became a detriment and became super unhealthy and took a tremendous toll. Because, I mean, my thing is just like when I commit to something, I'm all in. Yeah. And I don't really know how to half-ass anything. So it ended up taking a tremendous toll on my physical, emotional well-being. I had, you know, I literally just got my first haircut today for the first haircut in like 3 months. Like literally. Just because I just been so focused, I'm just like, why do I need to get my hair? Like, why do I care? But yeah, I think that that's definitely one of the things that's most misunderstood about me is that like I'm super social. I used to be in a past life, but all I do is work now. So I get anxiety when people ask me about, oh, hey, what's a cool bar? I'm like, I don't fucking know. Shit, I don't go outside.
That's what Yelp is for.
Yeah, let's say whichever got the highest stars is where you need to go drink.
Well, it's clear.
But I'm trying.
Go ahead. It's just to clear the common thread here is that you're just out hustling everyone, man. And I think at the end of the day, that's like the entrepreneurial mindset. And, you know, really, those are the people that get shit done, right? The people that just are willing to work harder than the person who's not.
That was my mindset whenever I moved out here. I was like, there's going to be people that are better writers than me or more talented than me, and there's going to be people that work harder than me, but nobody's going to be as talented as I am and work as hard as I am. So that was always my mindset whenever I came out here. So,
what's something you've changed your mind about recently?
I can't think of anything that I changed my mind about getting my hair cut. I wasn't going to do it, and I did it in part because I have to be social tonight and attend some industry shit, but primarily just because I just not having my haircut was reflective of how I've been treating myself. And I was like, if anything, you should just cut your hair and be well groomed just because you should feel happy and ecstatic and, you know, feel good about yourself. Yeah. So I went from looking like a wildebeest to looking like a presentable young man. So all I need to do is start eating and sleeping regularly again. And I might, you know, look like myself one of these days.
So what do you, as we wrap up now, last couple of minutes, what's got you excited about the show? I mean, you guys like knocked it out of the park on day one. And it's like when people hear that new podcasters, they must get like so freaked out because like shit, 6,000 listens on first episode. Like that doesn't happen.
No.
So and it set the stage for like the type of show you have and where you want to go from there. So I'm wondering if you have time. I know you're constantly firing on all cylinders, but if you have time to think about like what are the bigger plans about where you want to see it.
Definitely looking to, my biggest thing is just like, I definitely am looking at just accruing more resources. I feel like as great as the show has done in a year, that's just been with one person just busting their ass. So what would it look like if 2 people busted their ass, or 3 people busted their ass, or 4 people, or if I had more resources or money? So we're in talks with TuneIn to be doing some stuff to be announced in the future. Shout out to Tracy and Kayla and everybody over there. And just looking to lock in some partnerships that have been discussed. Definitely looking to do some more live events this year. We have some announcements coming up soon, very soon actually, and just broadening our reach, making more of a focus on our website, making it more of a destination, which is why I installed our brand spanking new EIC, SIN. Because I want our website to just be like a hub of just Black excellence and beauty, and just because websites are just so important nowadays.
Yeah.
And the podcast is doing great, but I want to create like a destination. I want to have content that people wake up every day, like ESPN. Every single day, if you're a sports head, you take your ass to ESPN and you read articles and you read box score. That's what I want to do as far as just like content that pertains to our community. I want you to wake up every day, go to extraordinarynegroes.com and just be like, okay, what's going on in my community? And that's what I'm really focusing on right now. And that's what we're in the stages of doing now, especially as far as incorporating more stuff geared towards music, more stuff geared towards, I'm wanting to expand upon an extraordinary impact features where we highlight people that are doing incredible things in their community, whether it's fighting sex trafficking or raising awareness around disabled community, whether it's, raising money for education, just like people that are just doing dope shit. I just want to highlight them and give them a platform and just continue to grow and evolve. And like I said, get some more resources poured into the podcast, some more money, hire some assistants and project managers and all this other stuff, and just really just flesh it out as a business.
Well, seems like you're definitely headed down the right path. I think, I heard a couple of shows and you guys sound like you're having a lot of fun as well. And
we are.
So I want to thank you for taking the time to come on, Jay. I really appreciate it. Given the fact that we've known each other only about a week, I had a feeling this was going to be a fun interview.
Yes, because tomorrow I'm not going to like you no more. So game over.
I'm on the 7-day trial.
Yeah, it's like Netflix. Like now I get slapped with the $25 charge, like Tidal or some shit.
If you return the Netflix CD,
right?
7 days later.
Right.
All right, brother. Thank you so much. And where's the best place for folks to track you down online?
People can find us at theextraordinarynegroes.com. You can find us on Facebook at The Extraordinary Negroes. You can find us on Instagram and Twitter at The Extra Negroes. And yeah, we're out here. We're everywhere. And you can also obviously listen to our podcast at The Extraordinary Negroes. We're available on iTunes, TuneIn. Definitely got to plug them. iTunes, TuneIn, SoundCloud, everywhere. So anywhere there's podcasts, we on there.
Very cool. Thanks again for taking the time, and I'm wishing you nothing but amazing success with you and the show.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks again to Jay. Pardon the excessive use of several F-bombs that I probably was saving them from all the past episodes where I didn't use them. But again, I just had a blast with him. He's such a real guy, and I'm looking forward to just hang out more with him. I'm really excited that we've connected. And if you are meeting people that you're vibing with, and you have an opportunity to like have them on your show or just connect with them more, get to know more about them, then definitely do that, because life is too short to not hang out with people that you're happy to in whose company you'd rather be and who you like being around. And that's what I want to do, and that's what I want to do with the podcast. And that's why I'm going to MapCon this coming up Friday in Philadelphia. So we are a member of Podcastica. Head on over to podcastica.com for the full slate of a cornucopia of podcasty tastiness. I think that's the tagline. I keep forgetting. But anyway, you get the point. Full slate of shows there. Music by the impeccable Cedar and Soil at cedarsoil.com. Don't forget to support our sponsor Podbean at podbean.com/podcastjunkies. and let me know if you do that, and I'll be happy to jump on a call with you and chat about your pet dog, your goldfish, and maybe your podcast as well. So the retention hashtag, if you made it to this point, you are a superstar. It's going to be adverbj, ADVERBJ. Jay is a writer, as you heard during the interview, and his amazing Twitter handle is death to adverbs. So that's great, right? Death to adverbs, and then the hashtag is adverbj. And ours is, of course, podcast_junkies. So do that and show us your love for the podcast. And then if you are interested in learning some of the great tools we're using to launch the show, that we use to launch the show and that we use on a regular basis, head on over to podcastjunkies.com/8tools. And that's the number 8, TOOLS, at the end of podcastjunkies.com. And you get that immediately downloaded to your computer. Tune in next week. We have a fantastic conversation with someone who's new to podcasting, but not new to storytelling. His name is Eric Trules. His podcast is called E-Travels with E. Trules. It's a fantastic show, and you'll find out why when you tune in to next week's episode. If you aren't subscribed to the show, shame on you. Actually stop now and go to your podcatcher of choice and make sure the subscribe button is clicked, so you get this awesomeness hand delivered to your phone, your tablet, your Roku, your Apple TV, your Sling. I don't know if this is true, but in case it is, your Sling box, whatever you're doing to consume content, your Castro, your Pocket Cast, your Shifty Cast. There's like so many, but you get the point. Subscribe to the show. You get the awesomeness, and then you don't miss any of these fantastical episodes. Thank you for all you do for podcasting. Thank you for all you do for this show, letting people know about it. The listenership is growing, and I have no doubt that I have you to thank. So I love you specifically, and I'll talk to you soon.